This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
So this is an additional disclaimer that today's topic is particularly sensitive and possibly controversial. I just want to say that ahead of time, we are talking about crimes against children, and if you have a sensitivity to that topic, today's episode might not be for you.
Good evening. First at 5, bombshell testimony from Christian Bahena Rivera today as he took the stand in his own murder trial.
Bahena Rivera told the court 2 other men in masks killed Molly Tibbetts and forced him to help them hide the body.
How many times did you drive by Ms. Tibbetts?
¿Y ahora cuántas veces pasó usted manejando por la señora Tibbetts?
Alrededor de 3 o 4.
Around 3 or 4.
And that was at direction of these men, is that right?
Correcto.
Correct.
But prosecutors came back with some tough questions for Bahena Rivera about why he didn't tell this to police.
KCCI's Chris Gothner is live in Davenport tonight as the defense rests its case.
Stephen Stacey, of course, Christian Bahena Rivera was under no obligation to testify today, but he chose to in order to explain his version of events. And that version is, yes, he was involved in the kidnapping and murder of Molly Tibbetts, but he was not a willing participant. That's what he testified today, and that he was not the one who killed her, testifying that he did not tell investigators the whole truth when they initially interviewed him. The crux of his testimony was that 2 unidentifiable men came to his trailer, told him not to do anything stupid, then forced him to drive, passing Tibbetts a few times as she was jogging. Then he testified that one of the men got out of the car while the other stayed inside. Here's what he says happens next through a Spanish interpreter.
He just started going towards forward, towards the town direction.
How long was he gone?
Alrededor de 10-12 minutos.
Around 10 to 12 minutes.
The guy in the back, was he doing anything?
What I heard him saying is, come on, Jack.
What happened next?
Well, around like 12 minutes after that person comes back to the car, he gets in.
What happens next?
Me piden que siga manejando.
They asked me to continue driving.
Now, Bahena Rivera did not identify the men as Dalton or his brother Blake Jack or anyone else for that matter. His attorneys have been trying to cast suspicion, though, on Dalton throughout the trial. Bahena Rivera claims after the men returned, he was ordered to drive to a rural Poweshiek County cornfield where they took off, never seeing them again, but not before they threatened his daughter's life if he told anybody. Bahena Rivera says he then opened the trunk after they left, found Tibbetts' body, and placed it in the cornfield himself, covering her body with corn stalks to keep her out of the sun, he says. Prosecutor Scott Brown had some tough questions for Bahena Rivera on cross-examination, trying to poke holes in his account and implying that certain elements of it simply beggar belief.
You drove the 2 men in your Malibu to the cornfield where you dumped Molly Tibbetts, correct?
Yes.
And you're telling us that you drove back to your home alone?
Sí.
Yes. And you happened to find your cell phone and the keys in the trunk of the car?
Sí.
Yes. And these 2 men just disappeared?
Así es.
That's right.
Now, Bahena Rivera testified that he chose not to call police and lied to them later out of fear for his daughter's safety. Brown also questioned him on that today. Now, with the defense resting its case today, we're expecting to go into closing arguments tomorrow and then jury deliberation, although before that, the prosecution is able to call rebuttal witnesses to the stand if they so choose. We're live in Davenport. Chris Goffner, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
And it wasn't clear until today whether Bahena Rivera would take the stand. Some defendants don't testify in their own defense. KCCI's Scott Carpenter talked to a legal expert about why Bahena Rivera's lawyers would call him as a witness.
Well, Stacey, I spoke with Lucas Taylor, a defense attorney in Des Moines. He says a defendant taking the stand is not unique. Taylor says the defense will call their client if they feel it gives the jury a clear picture of their story. When Bahena Rivera was under oath, he testified that two armed men forced him to take them to the spot where Molly Tibbetts was jogging. The defense trying to make the case that Bahena Rivera was forced to comply. Taylor says this could result in a not guilty verdict, but only if the jury believed his testimony.
It's going to come down to, in this case, whether the jury believes that he was credible in his testimony and whether his story makes sense. And so it comes down to, do you believe him or not?
And as Chris was saying earlier, Rivera also testified that he heard one of the armed men say, "Come on, Jack," in the backseat of his car, implicating a specific person was involved in the killing. We hear from Taylor on how he thinks that could influence the jury tonight at 6.
KCCI brought you Bahena Rivera's testimony live just after he took the stand this morning. And tomorrow morning at 8:30, we will bring you closing arguments as they get underway, live from Davenport.
First thing I wanted to mention was, have you followed this? First of all, there's a lot of missing kids, and I have a theory on this. Did you follow this case out in Texas where a kid went missing in Houston and he was found, they believe he was found in Jasper in the motel room?
No.
So this kid's name is Sam Olson, and the police have only been able to independently verify his location as of April 30th. And that's because he was in school, so they could say for sure where he was. So this has basically been an ongoing case in Texas for a month. And this is the one where someone said they believed a police officer was involved in taking him, or someone pretending to be a police officer was involved. So there's a lot of conflicting timelines, and that one's going to that's already making national news because I believe it is now a murder investigation.
So has he been found?
They're saying a body that's believed to be him has been found. So this is a 6-year-old boy named Samuel Olson, and it's one of many missing children's cases that have popped up around the country.
Actually, now that I see his picture, I do recognize him. When did it unfold that he was found?
It's just unfolding now. It's literally unfolding like in the last 12 hours or so.
So he was reported missing May 27th, which would be last week. And but the police chief or the assistant chief mentioned to the media that the last confirmed sighting, like you said, was April 30th at school. And so Samuel would have turned 6 over this past weekend, but they believe that they've recovered a body in a motel room in Jasper, Texas, and it's believed to be him. I don't know that they have officially made the identification or not, but
it's just the police chief has come out and said he believes it's him.
Right. So that would be 135 miles northeast of Houston. And so do you have any, so what was happening there? Do you have any idea?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. I started looking at this case because it's sort of this bucket of missing children all of a sudden. And this one is going to be on like the big news sites. I noticed that several of them had started to.
Oh my gosh, he was found in a tote bag.
Yeah. So the public information officer for the Houston Police Department was asked about the lapse of time from April 30th to the time that he was reported missing. And all that they would say there at Houston Police Department is that they feel like it's going to be a complicated case. What was interesting about it is Olson's mom was thought to be the last person to see him. And then his parents are separated, I believe. I can't tell if they're divorced or not, but it looks like Olson's dad has a new girlfriend because she started popping up in interviews. She said that she was going to take Sam to school, and the mother showed up with a police officer or someone she was under the impression was a police officer, and they took the kid. When asked about this account, the police said they haven't been able to verify that information, but they're talking to all of the parties involved. According to court records, his biological parents share custody of him, but everybody involved said they had no idea where the kid was. So there's something fishy going on here. They brought in EquiSearch pretty early on this as far as reporting goes, but maybe not so early as far as like when the kid's really been missing. But a 6-year-old going missing is not, it's not that unusual for one parent to have him and the other parent not to know where he was, if that makes sense. They've issued a bunch of search warrants all of a sudden in this case that essentially what the police are doing by issuing the warrants the way they are is saying that someone somewhere in this group of people is lying. Whether it's the mom or the dad's girlfriend, we don't know yet.
Well, I'm really concerned about this almost month between him being at school and him finally being reported missing. Now, I found, I believe it's Texas EquiSearch. So they post that this is on May 27th, 21. 5-year-old Samuel Olson was taken by an unknown male from the Southwest Houston home at about 7:30 a.m. on May 27th, 2021. Samuel was wearing a gray t-shirt with a red Kool-Aid man on the front of his shirt, jean shorts, and white Buzz Lightyear tennis shoes. That's what I remember about him.
Yeah.
Samuel was also wearing 2 mismatched superhero socks. Samuel has golden brown hair, but he also has a patch of white hair on the back right of his head. He is missing 2 of his bottom teeth, and he has a crease or a pointed area on the top of his left ear. If you've seen Samuel, they give their contact information out. But so this is really confusing. It seems like, okay, so if he really has been gone for, since he was seen at school, like all these adults have to be involved.
Well, I don't know about all of them. I can't, if they have joint custody and school is ending, there's no telling what might be happening there because he turned 6 years old in the middle of all this.
Like
he was
this
5.
weekend, he turned
right.
So, but okay, so you're not saying that he missed school since April, like that school ended in April. I was just saying if he's really been gone for a month, that is way more worrisome. But if he was just verified there and then school ended, that's different. Yes, I did see that. I remember reading about the Buzz Lightyear shoes because I thought, I wonder if they light up. So this is truly terrible. And it sounds like a page out of the recent abduction that wasn't an abduction. I believe his first name was Amari. I don't remember his last name.
Amari Nicholson.
Amari Nicholson with the mom sister came and got him. So now it's like the mom and the police officer came and got him. I wonder if they got the story from them. It's weird.
Well, so theoretically, this would have unfolded this would have been before that. If the missing persons reports are wrong, and they're saying that there's a timeline conflict here, but they're not clarifying what it is. At one point in time, it was said that his father's girlfriend was also missing or unaccounted for. So then I'm talking about Samuel Olson here. So it's a little different, but it's like the same timeline. And what I've been wondering is, okay, for the last year, pretty much all the kids in America have been locked up. They've been locked up in their houses on doing remote school.
And I feel like hopefully it won't be, but the backlash from that in theory could be staggering because there haven't been the additional possibilities of people noticing children missing.
Right.
And teachers. And, I know that real brick and mortar schools that went remote suddenly, I know that there are large numbers of students who are unaccounted for, and there's really nothing that can be done about it because of just sort of the way that things worked. And so hopefully we don't have this slew of children who have disappeared for real, not just not showing up for their remote classes because they don't know how to use the technology involved. But, hopefully there's not all these children missing. But yeah, it's kind of scary, isn't it?
It is. And I've been poking around. I looked in Oklahoma, Colorado, and Arkansas at these sort of spates of missing children. And what I determined there was, from what records I could get, it looks like certain sections of the country are more prone to immediately reporting the absence of children, particularly those children who are wards of the state. So when you get into a situation like Arkansas, you and I found this cluster that's sort of ongoing, and it was multiple children per year for like 10 years would go missing, and most of them would be recovered. But most is sort of a scary word, because if you're talking about 10 kids a year and 8 of them are recovered, that means 2 kids a year are still missing. And while that's not like a huge trafficking ring or something,
It's still 2 kids missing.
That's what I mean. I've discovered that like those 2 kids missing, it's really hard to get information on them until their 18th birthday has passed, because they're considered to be protected minors, particularly those who are wards of the state. So it like filing a Freedom of Information Act on children, this has been the most fascinating thing I've ever gotten involved in, as far as like trying to get like juvenile records where I can look at something. They really do protect those kids, and I guess it's really for their privacy and the fact that they're minors. But it makes it really difficult for anyone other than law enforcement to know what's been going on. So if there were to be law enforcement involved, it would sort of be the ideal situation where those missing kids would not likely be found.
So it looks like that Sam, his grandmother appears to have reported him missing.
Yes, and she was actively involved in his care. That's not like a distance caregiver either.
So she saw him on May the 2nd for sure. And then so it's Sam's father's girlfriend who was with him when the child was seen Thursday morning in Houston. So in the recap from EquiSearch, what they were saying, that scenario, it seems like he was with Teresa Balboa, who was his father's girlfriend. And so his mom has not seen her. His mom is Sarah Olson. And Sarah Olson's attorney said on Tuesday that she has actually not seen her son in almost a year. That adds sort of another layer to it. What the heck is going on here? Okay, so the last time anyone outside of his family saw Sam was on Friday, April 30th, but the last day of school is June 3rd, which would be
Okay,
tomorrow.
so he was missing. I was just thinking that maybe school was winding down, because that's what I'm experiencing.
And so this is what so Grandma saw him on May the 2nd. So, and that'd be, 2 days after April 30th when he was last seen at school. So you're looking at that kind of timeline right there, that something happened. And it appears that his father and girlfriend were most likely involved.
So you said something interesting, and that was that you were wondering like how the pandemic would affect these kids not being reported missing, and like, do we suddenly have
not an onslaught of them?
I have a different thought on that, and that thought is predators have not had any prey. This pandemic coming to a close, not that it's over, but like we have seen states opening back up and schools opening back up. And on my side of things, my kid will be back in the classroom. They'll have a summer program. What's interesting is people who prey on children have not been able to go out and do that. And I wondered if what we're seeing is some of that happening. And here's where that started for me. It started with Amari Nichols and Noah Trout. I was looking at those cases. I was just sort of following along because I was really interested in the reaction by social media and by, so many people are still sort of home or like in a different job situation than they were pre-2020, that I have been wondering, how is all the true crime community, and I don't know that they're all necessarily true crime community. It is some of the web sleuth communities, not the website, but the type of people. They've been really active on, different podcast pages and different missing persons pages. One of the cases that struck me recently, I was able to watch sort of in real time, also Las Vegas, which is where Amari Amari was. The Las Vegas situation that I've been watching, well, one, there's a missing girl there that absolutely fascinates me. And she's going to come up next week because we're going to cover a couple of interesting non-murder cases. This most recent Las Vegas situation is on Friday, May 28th, so last Friday in terms of recording, about a week ago in terms of release of the podcast, a boy was found off a hiking trail between Las Vegas and Pahrump, Nevada, which is, if you've never been out there, it is as remote gets. This area out here outside of have you been to Vegas?
No.
Okay, so once you get outside Las Vegas, it is like literally what you think of in every serial killer movie ever. Particularly, I think of the movie Seven, where at the end of Seven, they're driving out to this very remote location underneath these power lines. Driving through California and Las Vegas, there is a lot of desolate terrain out there.
I've seen the desolateness from an airplane.
Yeah, I've driven out through New Mexico. I've driven out through Nevada. I've driven out through Utah. I've driven out through Southern California, which is where I really think of like sort of desert. And so this kid is found dead out there. The thing about it is this kid is between 8 and 12. He's around 4 feet 11 inches tall, weighed around 120, 125 pounds. And they said his death was clearly a homicide. And they haven't released a lot of additional details, like what the kid was wearing. And in the middle of all this, watching the true crime pages and watching the Facebook pages, including multiple podcast pages, where they're sort of championing getting the word out. They do a lot of, I don't want to say it's like vigilante-like, because it really is more like spreading the word. They make an identification of this kid and they go to his mother's home in California, and it turns out it's wrong. But they put out an alert for the father and another child from the family, and the internet goes nuts on these people.
I think, hold on, because they put out an alert to have help from the media and the public to identify the boy.
Right.
The mother called them and said, I think that might be my son.
Right.
Okay. And then not being able to get in touch with the father, they show her, she makes an identification during which she signs an affidavit that indicates that the body was that of her child. Okay.
She makes a photo identification off multiple photos.
So, right. But she signs and says, yes, this is my child. So there's enough resemblance there that she has, in a sworn manner, identified the body.
Correct.
So I just wanted to throw that out there because that's different than the police just making the identification and showing up there. The mom did say, this is my child, I think.
She did. She said that and like you said, she swore to it. She swore to the best of her ability that she believed this was her child. She could not get in touch with her child, her child's half brother, or the father. And they were off the grid camping. They weren't doing anything nefarious. And that gentleman has since come on and said, hey, we're all safe. I was watching this unfold sort of in real time and sharing it with you. And the internet was going after this guy.
Well, yeah, because once the identification of the 8-year-old had been made, now this ends up being a misidentification shortly after, but once it was made, they put out an Amber Alert for the 11-year-old half-brother. And so these boys have different mothers, but the same father. And so they put out an alert for the 11-year-old brother. And then there's a bolo out for the father. And it said that, they're concerned about their well-being because of one of the kids. So the father had picked both of his sons up Thursday night, which would be the night before the body was found on Friday morning. And when the body was found, it was thought to be the 8-year-old. They say, oh, we're afraid they may be in danger. Now, they say that, of course, but everybody knows they think the father killed his son. And the 11-year-old is more than likely dead as well. And so from there, it was one of the worst things I've ever seen play out live, because they've made this identification, and then I think there was a certain disbelief in the fact that someone could have misidentified their own child in recanting that the body had been it had been identified, but it was a misidentification, because it was like, oh, the son and the dad have been found now. And
right,
so has the brother. And we're like, well, wait.
Well, so the way that it unfolded, it was a really good look at, I called it a game of telephone, but, and that for people who aren't familiar with that, I think people would be familiar with that, but that's where one person starts a statement or starts a story and passes it on. And as the story gets passed on, it changes. And there was a huge gap in time between we've identified this body and we're looking for these people to oops, that was a mistake. And the news was playing this massive catch-up cycle. I have never seen the catch-up cycle play out in a situation like this, where 1 minute it's this woman has identified this as a kid, there's another kid missing now, and there's a missing adult with them, and then it turns out that the identification is completely wrong. Watching that unfold and watching the voraciousness with which people were making these huge assumptions and presumptions about these people was fascinating. And that's why I'm not mentioning their names here. It's already, all over the news at one point, but I realized there's no way to put the lightning back in the bottle for that.
There's not. And I do want to point out that nobody really jumped the gun here. It was just a series of very unfortunate circumstances. The mother, actually, the sheriff said, even after it had been found that it was a misidentification, that the resemblance between her son and the boy that was found was uncanny. So there was resemblance there. And, except for the fact that her son was found alive just fine, there was nothing deceptive about what the mother did. She genuinely believed that that was her son. And so can you imagine the grief that she was feeling? And then the relief when he was alive. Now, the father did get, he got angry, and I feel like it was rightfully so, because like you said, the internet jumped all over him. Like he had killed his 8-year-old and possibly his 11-year-old sons. And he just happened to be out of cell phone range when this happened. So once they got that all straightened out, he was livid that anyone would believe that he would hurt his children. And I don't blame him, but I do just want to say, this is not something that would normally happen. Like the resemblance between the boys, the mom, misidentifying the body as that of her son, all these things added up to a really bad situation unfolding. But at the end of all that story, we are left with a child who he has no identity.
Currently, this child is still unidentified as of this recording. If that changes, I will update what we're talking about here. But I wasn't the only one who had this thought. While this was happening, I went online and I started looking for missing children, and I was shocked at how many missing children there are currently. Now, I found one that I thought was unusual. Like Sam Olsen was not going to be this kid. This kid was like a Caucasian Hispanic kid. And for those of you who don't know this in the true crime circle, Caucasian people can be Hispanic or not Hispanic. So there can be some crossover there that until DNA and genetics are done, you can't tell the difference. I went and found a case. I was looking for a case that was an unusual case. And as of this recording, this case is still ongoing. But the investigators involved in this case, they have come back and they have said, we are reevaluating what we're doing here because we're getting nowhere. And that's a case out of Montezuma, Iowa. This is an 11-year-old boy who went missing around the same time. He was last seen Thursday morning in Montezuma, Iowa. And for those of you who don't know this is an interesting thing. This is where the trial of Molly Tibbetts' killer was taking place last week, or wrapping up last week. Xavier Harrelson was last seen on Thursday morning. He is a little bit shorter and a little thinner than the body that was found in Las Vegas. And when I first looked at this, I was like, okay, I can't be the only one. And I'm not. There are other people talking about this on the internet. They haven't released an Amber Alert for this kid, which made me wonder, like, did they think he was a runaway? But looking at this case, what did you think of Xavier Harrelson for the Las Vegas body?
Well, I just want to point out he was 10 when he went missing, and his birthday was on Sunday.
So we have two with birthdays that are just...
Which is just, it's really terrible. So they released a sketch of the little boy found in Las Vegas, the body. And then after the misidentification, there was like a digital enhancement done of that sketch. I feel like it very well could be Xavier. But so one of the things is the distance geographically, and it's sort of a lack of information as far as the authorities in Nevada have not disclosed what the child was wearing when they were found, but we do have a description of what Xavier was last seen in. My point is, we would have to deduce that Xavier had really been missing a little bit longer than his last known sighting was, and I don't know if that was by somebody that, you know, if it was a caregiver that said they last saw him, then that's more likely to potentially be false, like a false lead. But if it's, you know, somebody else who legitimately saw him, that's less likely for it to be a false lead. But you're right, they haven't issued an Amber Alert. Now, what do you think about that?
The first thing that popped into my mind was they must think he is a runaway, or with, like, there must be something that they're either missing the boat on it, or they can't quite fit him into the criteria for an Amber Alert.
It's really interesting because this has actually brought to light quite a few points about the Amber Alert system, because when you've got this 10-year-old boy who goes off and he's missing, it's out of the ordinary. This is a little place, a little town, and they've expanded the search to the point where they've had a lot of volunteers out looking for him, and
busloads of them.
Yeah, and so in theory, and this is just my opinion, but his birthday was Sunday, and most children would like to be home and have birthday cake on their birthday. I guess there could be underlying reasons why he wouldn't want to do that. But so the Amber Alert criteria, above all else, it should be interpreted broadly because the point of it is to safely recover children who have been abducted. Okay. And it seems to me like the broad interpretation may not be being applied broadly enough in this situation. But the Amber Alert is designed for children who have been abducted. The reason is law enforcement, with the national Amber Alert system, they don't want to desensitize the public by doing it constantly. They want an Amber Alert to really alert the public. And so I think a lot of times law enforcement is hesitant to do it, but it's made to retrieve children that have been abducted. And when there are signs that there hasn't been an abduction, like in this case, he was last seen, I believe, riding his bike or walking away. So there was nothing happening. He didn't get like grabbed and put in a car and drove off. You know?
Nobody saw anything like that, right?
I feel like law enforcement has missed a huge point here, because I'd like to think that they have a good reason why they haven't issued the Amber Alert. But this child hasn't come home and he missed his birthday. And the fact of the matter is that if they've had over 500 residents looking for him for, several days now, he has most likely been abducted, because they've covered the ground he could have gotten himself to during that time. And so I feel like this might be something that needs to be, addressed, because especially being 10, turning 11, I feel like any child being missing for a week at that age should become an Amber Alert. I mean,
well, I noticed
problem.
That yesterday they brought in the CART team from the FBI, and that's the Child Abduction Response Team. So when they show up, that is an Amber Alert. I don't care what anybody says. That's the equivalent of it. I don't know why they haven't officially put out the Amber Alert, but the fact that the FBI has gotten involved was very interesting to me. And I wasn't sure. I looked at this case and I looked at the distance between this and the body found in Las Vegas, and I sort of weighed all the pros and cons there. And I did report this because I wasn't sure if anyone else was like grasping that. But the sketch of the body in Vegas and Xavier Harrelson's picture are very similar. They're very similar looking kids. And I wondered if it might not be one of those situations where they went, oh, that kid's Hispanic and this kid's really not. But I was sort of following this online, and other people started to see the same things that I did. And I was really fascinated by how some people were tearing down people for saying this. Like, they were saying it like on the local sheriff's department page where they had a post about Xavier. And other people were just mentioning, hey, did you talk to the people in Las Vegas who found this body? And people get really, really, really up in arms over missing kids in ways that I don't necessarily understand. I don't have the best, like, typically missing kids cases end badly. The ones that I have followed catch my interest because something is amiss, like this Samuel Olson case, and now that's turned into a body found in a tote bag. The Amari Nicholson case. Noah Trout turned out to be good. Like, he was found safe, and it's good as you could expect. I don't know, like, for a stranger abduction, it's as good as you could expect. This case and the Las Vegas case bother me on both ends of the spectrum because you've got two open-ended cases that, in my opinion, could be related. And I'm sure at this point that authorities there's enough chatter going on that they've at least had a conversation. And even if it's not the locals, I think the FBI CART team would go, well, we probably have to check that out because it is a lead.
Well, what you said, like, the reaction is it doesn't go along with what's actually happening, because what's actually happening is, like, at all costs, we should find this missing child. And so what kind of things would you see, like, with people like, oh, that's stupid, he couldn't have gotten that far away, or whatever?
So the first thing is, that's stupid, he couldn't be that far away, his last sighting was this, he's Hispanic, this kid's Caucasian. All these different things that really boil down to, I wish law enforcement would address it, because it's on the law enforcement page now that it's started to grow, and people have started to, like, notice the similarities between Xavier Harrelson and this body found in Las Vegas. And I just wish they would say, look, we checked it out. It's not the case. Something didn't match up, blah, blah, blah. In this case, even though there's a significant time difference between the locations, space and geography between the locations. But that's been one of my, like, those missing persons cases, I think, in a lot of instances aren't solved when it's something relatively simple because of one of the biggest things being geography. And that means the missing person is not where they went missing from, and the jurisdictions don't realize that this unidentified body, or this, John Doe, Jane Doe, whatever, is this missing person from this other jurisdiction. And it's one of the things that frustrate me the most about missing children's cases, is because I believe that missing children who aren't found alive are frequently found in other jurisdictions. And this goes back to, like, when we were talking about Aisha Degree and the little body found down in Opelika, Alabama, who has hearts on her little dress shirt that's laying there with her. That is even more than just a geography problem. That's a problem where they don't put a lot of money into finding kids found in trailer parks. Deceased.
So I saw that. I did see law enforcement. Somebody has made a statement that they believe the child resided in Clark County or Nye County, Nevada, and I wasn't sure if that was meant to address. It was meant to address the possible link between Xavier and the body that was found, being that because it was from a Nevada county, that it couldn't be him. But there could have been like all kinds of things. They haven't given any information about what the body had on or what was found with the body or anything like that. So there could be all kinds of things there. And there's something about it that makes law enforcement feel like the direct caregivers involved, because if you notice, they're asking specifically for grandparents, aunts, uncles, and teachers to look and try to see if they recognize this child. So to me, that means that they've already determined something that is telling them, whoever was directly caring for this child, the person essentially that would report them missing probably has not reported them missing. And that's why this is going to be such a challenge. Now, that doesn't go along with the fact that the mother called, except I guess that it would have been the father that, would have been responsible, or a stranger, I guess. But it is interesting to see how this is going to sort of play out. I feel very terrible for that poor little boy. And I think that under the circumstances, Xavier would be a good, they at least need to make sure, they need to eliminate them as each other for sure, for certain. And I don't really care about the stupidity that someone may think about it, because the sooner you know that he's not him, the sooner you can move on. I mean, what if it is
totally
him,
agree
though?
with that. Yeah,
And
if it is
could have
him,
been immediately solved.
what makes me like keep talking about it is that, I'm watching these busloads of volunteers get off looking for Xavier, and Xavier Harrelson is multiple hours away from here. So my concern is that jurisdictions get to looking at this and they go, it's too far away, or like we have this other sighting and like it just doesn't line up time wise. But also that sort of brings us to like the next part of what we're talking about. So there was this documentary. I don't know if you saw it. It was on Netflix. It's called Don't Fuck with Cats.
I did see that.
And that was one of those things where the citizen sleuths there took up arms in in a couple of different cases they're referencing, but specifically with Lugo Magnotta. Do you remember his case? Like in general, you don't have to remember like a lot about it, but that's the case that sort of set that off.
Right, yeah.
What I found interesting is that no one has done this yet. And if they want to, this would definitely be the way to do it. The internet goes fucking crazy when kids go missing. And so much so that there's this entire subgenre of true crime that is about predator hunting. And when I say subgenre, when I say that's a subgenre of true crime, I don't mean like the entertainment side of it. I mean like people make organizations and groups and act individually to prevent harm to children, or at least that's the appearances they give. And I guess the best way to talk about this is, we've got these missing kids here. One of the things I used to watch and find highly interesting was To Catch a Predator. So To Catch a Predator was an NBC show, which this team led by Chris Hansen would go on the internet, and this group that worked with them, Perverted Justice, they would specifically seek out places where adults went to pick up children. And when I say pick up children, I mean the adults acted like they were in a bar getting a date. And what the Catch a Predator team would do is they would set up a meeting between the child, in big air quotes, who is actually usually a member of this team, and the person who is seeking to have a sexual relationship with the child, whoever they were, man, woman, whatever. These groups this was all done under the insurance at NBC at one point. But that show had trouble because there were multiple situations where it became too far into the realm of entrapment. And at one point, they ended the show. They did try and bring back a version of it, but they ended the show in 2007 because a man ended up killing himself as a film crew and a police agency forced their way into his home. That man's family sued NBC, claiming that the show was steamrolling police and pressuring the officers into making arrests without taking proper precautions of what they were doing. And NBC settled that suit out of court in 2008 because of some things that were found on the tapes of To Catch a Predator. Well, that leads us to today. These people, and by that I mean vigilante predator hunters, are coming to light in multiple different ways. Kyle Swanson, who is 30 years old and refers to himself as a predator hunter, is currently facing a grand jury indictment after a confrontation went wrong. Now, let me tell you what Mr. Swanson does, because this is interesting to me, and everybody in this situation is wrong. Everyone. So what he has been doing is attempting to serve justice in St. Louis. He's been tricking alleged pedophiles into coming out and meeting him by posing as a child on the internet. He has spent more than 2 years working with a group that calls themselves the KTS Predator Hunters. And they lure men into meeting them in public, where they confront the alleged pedophiles and live stream their encounters for thousands of followers. This is totally something that's going to end up being a reality show at some point again, but more from the perspective.
I was going to say it already was.
but like the confrontation between Chris Hansen was very put together and low key about everything he was doing. This is like the mob with the pitchforks in the village live streaming it on Facebook, which is interesting. So whatever happens in this particular predator hunt confrontation, Mr. Swanson is now facing a grand jury indictment for unlawful restraint and obstruction of justice. Both of those are felonies, by the way, and he's facing charges for misdemeanor assault. During one of the encounters recently, Mr. Swanson lured a man into his car, refused to let him leave, and then threatened to hit him. So the grand jury's decision here reflects the idea that when members of a community decide to take justice into their own hands, even for laudable purposes, they can place themselves and others in danger and damage potential cases. That comes from Madison County State's Attorney Tom Hain in a statement to the Washington Post about this case. Mr. Swanson has taken to his social media accounts to deny any wrongdoing on his part, and he's complained about law enforcement's decision to charge him. In a TikTok video, he recently said, "They are protecting the pedophiles over me. I've done nothing but try to do good. I try to protect kids, and now they're screwing me over." While Mr. Swanson claims that he had been somewhat of an asset in law enforcement's fight against child predators, Madison County, Illinois' law enforcement officials apparently have been at odds with the group since their inception. Tom Gibbons, the former state attorney for Madison County, previously warned Mr. Swanson that his group's actions could easily swing out of control and result in violence, which have made it difficult for Madison County to charge criminals. He said he urged the group to stop setting up meetings with suspected pedophiles. This is crazy. The Madison County Sheriff also asked Mr. Swanson to stop the confrontations, asking them instead to send tips to law enforcement professionals. Though Mr. Swanson claims his group has been instrumental in hundreds of arrested pedophiles seeking to rape children, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reported in 2019 that many of the cases fall apart because prosecutors do not have enough evidence to secure convictions. In addition to putting police operations at risk, the group also opened itself up to lawsuits from its targets. I mean, I think that's less likely to happen. I don't think people caught in a pedophile sting, even by Batman and Robin here, are going to turn around and sue Batman and Robin. Maybe they are. It's not my current understanding of what the financial situation is over at KTS Predator Hunters, but I'm guessing they operate on donations pretty openly.
Or nothing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Last year, one of the men confronted by the vigilante group sued them for defamation, proving me completely wrong, and claiming that the group's post about him led him and his family to face endless harassment by Mr. Swanson's followers.
That's where the mob justice comes in, because you've got this leader who says something and then everybody jumps in and they just feed off of one another.
Right, and this is what I was talking about with those other cases and what I've been watching on the internet. Then The people that I've been reading pretty specifically that are on the more violent end seem less prone to action. These people are actively following someone who is prone to action. Whatever you want to call this, ever what side you want to land on this of the ethical and moral nature, legally most of what they're doing is on the teetering edge of being illegal. So in this lawsuit, it says the defendants maliciously and intentionally caused the publication of false statements to a Facebook group with thousands of followers for the purpose of harming the plaintiff's good reputation. By the way, the lawsuit was dismissed in March. Mr. Swanson also faced criticism from a local school district for luring an alleged pedophile into a school's parking lot for a meeting without alerting the school system he was doing so. And obviously, the vigilante group takes its inspiration from To Catch a Predator. So what these guys are doing is they're engaging on apps. They're engaging on social media. So it used to be chat rooms. And I don't know if you remember this time or not, but people used to go on like AOL, and they would use AIM, which was AOL's Instant Messenger. You could go into any number of chat rooms to find a person and then bring them into your personal messages or private messages and have conversations with them. When I was in college, we had Telnet programming, but it was mainly other college students. You would log into these chat rooms. I used to log into the one called The Resort, and that's how I met kids from other school that had the same interests as me. And I would talk to those people on The Resort, on Telnet. And, you know, I still am friends with one of them today. Like, we still message over Facebook, and he and I talk about our families, and like, I like all his little posts. We ended up doing an internship together many, many years ago in the same place. That used to be more interesting than it is. But the one thing we didn't have was children. There were no children in those rooms at that time. It was all basically, I would say, 18, 19-year-old to 30-year-old people, because those were the types of people who worked in the environments that really would promote something like that. It's much different today. These guys are using Tinder and Grindr and Whisper and all these other apps, and basically targeting people they think are after children.
So what do you think about that? Like, do you think
it's crazy?
You said that it's teetering on illegal. Well, according to the most recent charges, it appears to be actually illegal.
Okay, so let me clarify.
He hasn't been convicted of anything, but
this guy is alleged to have broken the law. What I'm talking about is the group itself is teetering on illegal. One, putting up the false identity, baiting people into the situation, and becoming your own version of a judge and jury is bad news. There is an organized way that this could be done that would fall in line with
law enforcement.
Well, law enforcement or crime analysis or whatever you want to call it. There is a way for the exploitation of children to be investigated in a manner that, like, this is one leg of it, where these people are found and identified and those names are turned over to law enforcement. That's the part, like, when you don't turn it over to law enforcement, it's where you break the law.
One thing I do want to point out now, they call themselves predator hunters, but like several times in the information, the different various articles that we've read, they speak of their targets as alleged pedophiles. And I just want to point out that most of the time, these are grown men who are going after teenage girls or boys. And I don't know, it could be grown women too. So it's not actually pedophiles, because if you're a pedophile, you are targeting prepubescent children, right?
Correct.
And I just want to point that out because it kind of, it's just a thing that sort of sticks to me. And I thought it was good that they were just calling them predator hunters as opposed to like pedophile hunters. But, then it went on to talk about the pedophiles. So,
yeah. And this next little situation, you get the idea that what they're hunting is people who are attracted to 13 to 16-year-old girls and boys. That's what they're aiming at.
We say, okay, so everybody looks at this and we're like, well, that's just crazy, right? Except that if you look into it further, you actually find some stuff that's quite disturbing and makes you go, maybe it really is necessary.
What do you mean?
Well, because we look into this vigilante predator hunter who's been charged. And now this is not the same group, but it's the same type of group.
Are we moving to Indiana now? So we were in Illinois. Are we moving over to Indiana?
Yeah, because I want to talk about this and then a couple other points about this topic. But so, we look at it and we think, well, what they're doing is, it's vigilante justice type things because they are going after people who are after children. What could they possibly be doing wrong? Law enforcement really should be involved. But yesterday, there was a breaking story that was released that the predator catcher of Indianapolis group, which is PCI, that's how they refer to themselves.
So another different predator group, not the same one we just talked about.
Right. It's a different one, and they call themselves PCI. An Indiana police officer was arrested after being confronted by that predator catching vigilante group. And the prosecutors say that one of the members of the group had posed as a 14-year-old girl, which is, like I was saying, this is not pedophile territory. And then the people who made the confrontation, they live streamed the confrontation that they had with the man that they had been talking to, who was a small town police officer who showed up at a restaurant in Avon, Indiana, to meet a 14-year-old girl whom he had engaged in lengthy, inappropriate conversations with on a messaging app. And he was there for the purpose of having sex with her. I assume it was in furtherance of the messages they were having. So law enforcement, of course, was stunned because one of their own was involved in this, and they commented that while they appreciated the transparency, it really should be done through law enforcement. Joshua Clark, who was the police officer who was confronted by PCI, he was immediately suspended from his job, and then he resigned.
And this is not their first thing that they've done. Those guys had another arrest. This is the second arrest, like within a month or something.
Yeah, no, it's been not long.
So the group trapped a gentleman named Michael Hankins into a confrontation when he allegedly showed up to meet another underage girl, played out by the group themselves, at the local Ashley Furniture. And while the police said they've gone on to investigate and prosecute these cases, but for the most part, they're worried because these vigilante confrontations are dangerous. So they don't support what they're doing. They don't support, I guess it's more how they're doing it because they're not law enforcement, which makes sense.
Right. And then, so earlier this year, they came upon a high school band teacher named Brian J. Boyer. And he was arrested after one of the group's decoys showed up at the high school. And he thought that the high school band teacher thought he was meeting a 14-year-old girl for sex. The high school band teacher was terminated. And he was terminated from his job on January 29th. And that was after he was charged with one count of soliciting a child. So we say, oh, this is crazy. Vigilante justice can't happen. But then you've got a police officer, a random guy, and a teacher all being sort of brought down by these vigilante predator catching groups.
Yeah, but see, okay, so, and this is the part I'm going to say some things that, like, we have another episode coming out that's really controversial as well. But I just got to point out that, like, these thought crimes are not actual crimes. I understand that they get people in arms, and people want to take down these guys because, oh my God, they're pedophiles.
But when you're a grown man pretending to be a teenager, they have not committed a crime.
Right, and that's where this is so problematic. Is, first of all, the kids that would constitute someone being a pedophile for them to be attracted to are not these kids. And I'm not saying that that makes it right, but I just want people to understand the terminology is different and the prosecution of those crimes is different. Rape of a child is different than statutory rape for a reason, because legislators have determined that it's much more traumatic for the child than it is for the teenager. It is still traumatic for both of them.
Well, but it's also a much more depraved person committing a act of pedophilia because of the innocence of a child. And you know, I'm not saying that teenagers aren't innocent, but it's, you know, 14-year-old girls, they do not have the capacity to consent to having sex with aged men over the age of 18, adult men.
Well, with anyone, but it's illegal.
With anyone. But the reasoning behind that is, you know, they make bad decisions because teenagers make bad decisions. But with children, though, it's a distinguishment because a 14-year-old could voluntarily show up to meet these old men. And as far as I'm concerned, if you have a 14-year-old child, you need to make sure that they're not doing that. Okay. That's my perspective on it. And I know people will disagree or whatever, but there's a huge role that parents play in not allowing things like that to happen to their children. And the way that they do that is communicating with their children. But as far as little children goes, little children aren't going to be in chat rooms talking with anybody.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting is it really is a niche thing that they're doing.
I think the best way to combat this is for parents to talk to their kids because I could see this going a lot of ways. I'm surprised that some of these charges stuck at all because...
Well, I will say this. First of all, I just want to point out that what you just said was that the way to combat what we're talking about is for parents to talk to their kids. So based on what you just said, that is a 65-year-old man looking at his 35-year-old son or 40-year-old son and saying, son, you can't pretend to be 14-year-old girls in chat rooms anymore. Because that's who's involved here. There's no children involved here. I want to make sure that the idea that because they talked to this fake 14-year-old girl, they would talk to a real 14-year-old girl. Well, no, that's not the case. But
I was actually addressing why these vigilantes are acting to begin with. They're acting because there are predators out there who go after young girls. So by pretending to be young girls, they can get the predator. I'm saying a better alternative to vigilante justice is for parents to talk to their children. Instead of having a vigilante group going after the predators, let's talk to the prey before they become the prey.
I agree with that, but you can't call yourself a vigilante predator hunter, pedophile hunter group if you're going to pretend to be 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls or boys or whatever.
Right, and you can't get a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girl or boy to do this kind of behavior because then you're literally putting them in the trap.
And that's useless because this becomes the thing about thought crimes. That's what this is where somebody thinks a thing, therefore they're committing a crime. That we can't do that to people. And
we really can't. And it's not. And I think there's a situation that would get across to everybody why it's not a good idea. Like something that somebody could relate to would get across to it. Just because these men have communicated with these pretend kids, I'm sorry, but they haven't committed a crime. That doesn't mean I want them to be able to go and prey on young girls. I'm just saying, like you said, we really don't want to be punished for our thoughts. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, these people should be they should be kept as persons of interest.
Well, sure, but I'm saying there's always going to be predators out there. So everybody should tell their daughters, don't go after gross old men. Do not talk to them. And so I think that
and their sons.
Well, right. Their children. they have to, and that can be really awkward, but you have to sort of get over it.
Okay, so the idea is they're predators, so they're hunting these children. That is the concept that this is based on. But if you are preying on a section, see, this is where like I get into my mindset is a legal mindset, not a psychological mindset. So from a legal perspective, what is the difference between someone who is hunting a man who would talk to a man pretending to be a 14-year-old girl? And like, what is the difference between the two roles? Because they have both committed the same amount of crime.
Literally, they have. But figuratively, the predator hunters are saying that what they're doing, that the ends justifies the means, and their plight to embarrass people, essentially, it looks like is what they're doing. They want to call people out on this terrible behavior. And I can see where it comes from this place of maybe feeling like you don't have control. But I would just say that it's not the right approach. And I don't know, like, what's the point of the live stream and like huge following?
They're doing it for attention.
Right. And to embarrass the person.
Right. To literally commit defamation. Because at that point, that's a civil thing, not necessarily a criminal thing, but it's still a legal issue.
Well,
it's a court issue.
Well, I guess it is, but so it's my opinion, and maybe this happens. I don't know because it wouldn't be brought to the attention. But, if they really wanted the person not to do it, they would be like, hey, buddy, you've been talking to, a 30-year-old man that's pretending to be a 15-year-old girl, and we're going to get you some help.
Oh, okay. They don't even need to get them help. Just tell them that. Just tell them I have your home address. That's it. That's all you have to say. You don't have to go out in public and confront them.
It shouldn't be a threat type thing, I don't think.
No, you tell them, like, we're going to turn you into the police.
Well, that's a threat.
What do you mean?
We're going to turn you into the police.
So then what's the point then? Like, what's the point if there's not going to be a threat? Are you saying that people shouldn't threaten other people, even in this situation? Because I happen to think that's the correct thought. This should not go on. That just because you put a moral compass on yourself and go, I have society's compass here, I'm here for the children, doesn't mean your behavior is less criminal.
I guess in that respect, neither one of them is committing a crime. Because they're both just grown men talking.
This is really just like what
so
they.
None of it's criminal. It's all just stupid.
What they should do though is that, like, you want to get 10 million followers on your social media outlets or whatever as a predator hunter. As a predator hunter, this is how they do it.
Right.
You invite them all to the same place and have them sit down and have a conversation, and like. At the end of it, you say, we're going to let you go, but you have to tell us why you do this. And you say, tell me the story of the first time you did this and why you did it. That's what you do. You don't confront them and say, oh my God, don't touch the babies. You sit them down and say, why do you do this? Then it's a useful thing.
Okay, but here's the problem with that. Okay, and I'm like you said, you want to talk about the legalities of it. You can't do that to people.
Can't do what to people?
You can't make them stay somewhere and tell you something.
Well, they already are. They're already confronting these people. Okay. I'm saying offer them an exchange. We won't turn you into the police, but tell us right now on this live little telephone that I'm holding in your face, say into the black box why you do that. Everything they're doing is terrible, but here's my problem.
It's just a round and round.
I think the Habiba files being Habiba files is terrible. Okay, I think that the people preying on teenage boys and girls is terrible. Like, I don't care if they're 17-year-old boys and girls, 18-year-old boys and girls. I think that is terrible. Like,
teenagers are so gross. I mean, they really
teenagers have no idea what is going on in their world. They really aren't even thinking about the fact that this person is hunting them. They didn't even realize that was a thing. All they're thinking about is how do I get rid of the zit and the smell.
They don't realize it's a thing. You're absolutely right. I think that a lot of times teenagers are groomed specifically because they have no clue as to what's going on. And that's part of the balance of, having your child avoid exploitation while not completely like ruining their innocence. It's practically impossible.
I just don't think so if people that listen to us are in a predator group, I can tell you right now, I don't see the world the way that you do. And I don't disagree with wanting to do something, but there's a lot of other things that you could do. You could go become a police officer unless you have the problematic criminal history I imagine most of these people have. And at that point, maybe be a crime analyst. And if you don't want to do that part, maybe just be a good human.
Right. Well, and I would encourage everybody, whether you're in a predator catching group or not, to be a good person. I get where these guys are coming from. I think that anytime it's too much of anything, it ends up being a bad thing. In that, I mean, there is some, not really glamour, but there's, popularity and likes to be had or whatever on social media. The question would be, what would drive you if that wasn't driving you? Because, the mob state of mind is a thing.
I agree. But okay, let's think about this for a second. What the hell, standing in a court of law, do your 10,000 likes on some picture or video have?
It has absolutely no standing. And honestly, if I were to be, I don't try to talk to children I don't talk to anybody on chats, but let's say that something happened and I ended up being confronted by somebody for some reason. I'm not going to say shit to them.
Okay, but here's the deal. These people are never going to come across the people that are trolling for children on Tinder or Grindr or whatever it is that they're Whisper or whatever messaging thing they're finding them on. Because what we should do if we're good parents and good humans, and we don't let our 8-year-old play on Snapchat or Kick or Whisper or whatever. I don't know. I don't keep up with any of these apps, but
is that how they're meeting them? Really?
Yeah. It's through these messaging apps and stuff. But what I'm saying is, so this is just the one freebie for any of the people out there thinking of meeting children. This is my one freebie to you. Don't think that you're meeting children on these apps. They are 30 and 40-year-old men who want to shame you.
I think that that's just
so
really
that's my one freebie to them. But
that's
to
really
the 30 and 40-year-old to the 20 to 50-year-old people, I'm expanding my age range, who are doing this as predator catchers, please realize you are not catching the cream of the crop prey. You are turkey hunting instead of
predator.
What do you mean?
You said you're not catching the cream of the crop prey.
Okay, but in this case, the predator is also the prey. Because they're saying they're predator.
Really confusing.
But listen, they're predator catchers, right? So they are catching the predators. Therefore, the predators are their prey. So my point is, you're not catching them. You're not catching those people. Those people are out in the real world hunting children, and you are on the internet hunting people who are in their 20s and 30s and have no idea how to meet a girl or boy.
And there's just so much about that what could be dissected in an actual legal process. But it's a big deal to be, one, a pedophile, two, any sort of sexual predator against children, whether they be teenagers or younger. And so it is a big deal, and we shouldn't take any of it lightly. There's a lot of, things that have to be met under laws to have people be classified as such. And it's there for everyone's protection. And I am a big advocate for not just jumping on the mob train and embarrassing people over things when technically they probably haven't even committed a crime, because I'm fairly certain that those type of, it doesn't say if you think about doing it and then you have conversations with people pretending to be, that you have committed this crime. I feel like there's a reason, our justice system exists for a reason. And I can also see where somebody who feels like somebody they love has been victimized and law enforcement hasn't done enough in the situation would take matters into their own hands. I feel like that's a spark, a big spark for vigilante type justice. That's why it happens. It's because we feel powerless and we don't feel like there's an authority or doing what they should be doing.
Right.
But honestly, in this situation, they are catching the people that they've catfished.
Right. So, yes, they're catching their own catfish. That's exactly what they're doing. And, I talk about these differences, though, between hebephilia and ephebophilia and pedophilia, because they do matter. All of these chronophilias matter. I think these people in their mind are protecting the children. But realistically, what they're doing is derailing the people who would be after the teenagers. Here's the interesting part about why that is a non-starter for me. Most of the teenagers that I found want nothing to do with old people.
Right?
At all.
And that's why
they're not showing up to that meeting.
Right. And so that's where I wonder, like, how much of this stuff actually occurs, because all we ever see is like the catch a predator or the predator hunter version of it. We don't see it really happening, right?
Well, no, and even the stuff that I see in the news is typically local law enforcement doing the same thing that those organizations did.
Right. And that's not technically that crime being committed. And so I would be, maybe a teenager that's not in the greatest home life position might be enticed by something like whatever they feel is valuable. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, and then I think the other premise would be like the way that some, especially teenage girls, but I'm sure teenage boys too, like they just want to be attended to, basically. And if a older person provides that for them. But yeah, I mean, most teenagers would be like, oh.
And most of the teenagers I know can run away in these situations if they got themselves into it.
Yeah. And okay, I still require my child to tell me everywhere that he's going to be. He doesn't just get free reign. So.
Oh, I'm the same way. And I don't even know if I'm doing it the right way, but pretty much the amount of time that they're away from me, particularly during the pandemic, but also just in general, like I would have a really good idea where to start if something happened to them. But places they tend to go now, at least, and I'm sure it'll change as they get older, are public places, because it's not even based on them wanting to be in a public place. It's based on them not wanting to know the person that they're hanging out with. They don't want them to know that they like them. They spend most of their time trying to be friends with everybody. They're already worried about 50 other awkward things that are going on in their life. I don't think they're going to be in a situation where someone is going to lure them over Tinder or I keep saying that one, but that's more of a dating app. I was
going to say, well, again, you said messaging app, and I've said before that I don't know anything about online dating.
I couldn't tell you a single messaging app today that isn't the little text box on my phone. I don't even know what it would look like.
I have no idea, but I do think that. So okay, I think it's safe to say that like pedophiles, they steal their victims, like they take them.
Well, that's the reason that this comes up in the middle of everything else we were doing, because I am picturing like predator groups going after, say, the misidentified boys case. So you got the boy that's found, his body is found, and then the dad and the brother are accused. Or the dad and the brother are sought. The dad is basically being accused of having something to do with it without anything official being said. I worry that a predator group getting involved with that situation would have really bad consequences.
I read the follow-up on like what actually happened to the dad, and it was really bad. Like they're going to be traumatized forever just from what law enforcement did. So yeah, definitely not. There's a reason we don't want, I mean, honestly, law enforcement can barely do it. We really don't want, ordinary Joe out there taking it upon himself.
No, it's not usable in court either. That's the other thing.
It is. It does make for an interesting story. But I also feel like, what if they talked and then they have the confrontation with the man and then they don't ever do it again? Their worst secret ever is exposed. And for what? Some likes? It just makes you have to think about people, all people, that they are people. And I think child predators are terrible. But at the same time, I don't feel like any of us are in a position to really take it on like a vigilante, because there's certain things that have to be established.
Well, when you get into luring someone with the types of conversations that these guys broadcast on their live feed, because they show the text messages that have gone back and forth between these people. And when they do that, when you look at it, I don't know that normal people would know what to do if they, because like some of these people are married and whatnot, but the bulk of them are just unattached people who, you showing them that kind of affection, they're thinking in their head, oh, she's 14, 15, whatever. I can't do that. But then the conversations get really explicit really fast. And they show this on, like, you can go on, like, if you look up one of the predator groups, I'm not putting them in our show notes or anything.
No, thank you.
I'm saying, like, people listening want to know more about this. You can go watch these live feeds where they explain what they've done, and like that's how they justify it. The justification is, look how explicit this guy was when I said, do you want to touch my boobies? Which I'm saying, like, the most generic version of it, the nicest version of it. What they're doing is it gets very graphic and explicit because they're trying to say, look what we had on this person, the text messages. We told him we were going to do this, this, and this.
But you're a grown-ass man pretending to be a teenager. It's not illegal.
I know.
And to me, I
do wonder psychologically if it's like abuse victims and white knights. Like, what is the collection of people that end up in these predator groups?
That are hunting them, you mean?
Yeah, like the hunting groups.
Well, definitely people just trying to stand up and do something. And, I think most of society can agree that child predators, pedophiles, anybody that's targeting children, they're bad. Like, everybody can agree on that.
Yes, children are to be protected. That's it. Children are to be protected so that they can grow to be adults.
They absolutely are, right. But here's my thing, though. For example, I don't know what the situation was with the man committing suicide. I don't believe that episode aired. I don't feel like whatever that man did, I don't know that it was worth him killing himself over, like, especially if he was talking to like a 17-year-old girl or something. That's not being a pedophile. It is, preying on young girl, but it's also something that could be, he could take his punishment and probably have to register as a sex offender and continue on with life. And I feel like it's sort of unbalanced the way that he must have felt like it was shame he couldn't endure.
They were already under fire. The group itself, Perverted Justice, who was assisting To Catch a Predator, was already under fire when all of that happened. But the gist of it was, it started with a lot of the charges. In case no one knows this, almost 100% of the charges of anything you saw on To Catch a Predator was eventually dropped. There were a few plea deals made and some other things that happened, but if they weren't dropped, they were basically found. There was something else they found because of it. The entrapment defense overall was essentially not working for any of them. They just found problems with the way that those situations were set up and who they were bringing in. In general, the evidence was inadequate to charge them with what they wanted. Now, there was a point in time where Perverted Justice started getting paid to do the work, and 2020 versus Dateline, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but back in 2007, 2020 started investigating Dateline and the To Catch a Predator group, critiquing them from the perspective of having a conflict of interest, paying the groups to keep working with them, but also generally the way that they were going about it and the way they were putting these things together, they got worse and worse and slimier and slimier. But the way that To Catch a Predator ends is that Bill Conrad Jr., who was an assistant district attorney from Terrell, Texas, he gets involved in a sting operation Local law enforcement identify him as a suspect attempting to solicit sex from a person he believed to be a 13-year-old boy. Now, Dateline cameras recorded all of this. The events that followed end with Conrad shooting and killing himself upon encountering police who were serving an arrest warrant at his home for an attempt to solicit a minor for sexual acts. The way that this all goes down is Perverted Justice begins to contact him through online chatting on the website MySpace. They're soliciting each other, essentially Conrad, who says he's a 19-year-old university student, and the Perverted Justice person who says he's a 13-year-old boy. They are soliciting each other to send pictures of each other's penises. For unknown reasons, Conrad stops responding to all of the phone calls and instant messages and blocks the person on MySpace. He then goes back through and begins to dismantle his social media, which at the time in 2006 would have been his MySpace page. They start like pulling pictures down. And according to Perverted Justice, when that content began to disappear, it led them to believe that Conrad was attempting to cover his tracks. So this is what led to the authorities deciding to go ahead and pursue a warrant in this case before he was shown on the air or anything like that. And Chris Hansen talks about this. He talks about the disappearing blog. The push was that the Texas persons involved in this case, under Texas law, they can be charged with an attempt to solicit a child if they participate in sexually explicit chats where the other person has made it clear that they themselves are children, which is bizarre. But essentially, this is, like you said, 30-year-old man playing 13-year-old boy. And I don't remember exactly how old Bill was, but he was in his 50s. I want to say he was close to 60. He had been a prosecutor, and this sting was going to ruin him. The official participants in the sting were the Murphy Police and the Terrell Police Department, and they brought the SWAT team. And they...
Am I understanding it correctly that you're saying that once this conversation happened, there was no getting away from it for him?
Correct.
How is that fair?
Well, it was the solicitation of the photos that ultimately did him
but
in.
He kind of argued, and this is just, I'm not trying to, he was essentially talking to a grown man, two grown men talking, okay? But, it couldn't have been much because if he was in his 50s, he wasn't going to look like a 19-year-old college kid when he showed up. I mean, come on.
Yeah, this was all fantasy. This is fantasy.
And so he blocks the kid. He tries to undo what he's done. He tries to stop everything. Okay. And instead of going, well, maybe we've squashed that, they escalate it.
They escalated it, correct.
So what is...
they did it in the name of ratings. That was the ultimate...
Okay, but essentially, if there is no out, I see why the guy shot himself. He had no out. I mean, he had no way out. He blocked the person. He tried to get rid of everything. I can't imagine what he had publicly out there that could have been so damning that they felt like they needed to move once he started removing it.
Well, where the problem comes in is Perverted Justice has started to be paid consultants, and they were amping this shit up. And Dateline was on the scene with the Murphy Police and the Terrell Police Department, including Terrell's SWAT team. There was at least one Dateline cameraman who had hidden himself nearby with a camera. Chris Hansen was there. They denied that crew members were on private property. But in the footage is a member of Perverted Justice who was seen advising the police on what to do at Conrad's house. And they had been there for at least 5 hours, according to neighbors who had called the police on the Dateline crew. So the police broke the door, swept the house, and they encountered him in a hallway. They encounter Conrad in a hallway. This is a tactical injury that they're making. So the reason they made that, the justification on paper, was that they feared that Conrad was aware he was about to be arrested and he was destroying evidence. That's based on something Perverted Justice told them. When they confront him, he is holding a .380 handgun And according to the officers who were there, he basically said, I was never going to hurt anyone, or I'm not going to hurt anyone, or there's nothing I was going to do to hurt anyone. And he pulls the trigger and kills himself.
Right. And I guess a lot of people did. I mean, there's a problem with that.
Yeah. And this was all resolved. Basically, his sister, Patricia, sued NBC Universal. But it was all settled out of court anyways. Ultimately, it was investigated by 2020. 2020 is investigating Dateline because Catch a Predator spawns out of Dateline. But this whole mess is vigilante nonsense. No matter how you look at it, no matter how much the cops were involved, the actions that bring this stuff to our attention is vigilante.
Right. And I think that anytime there's vigilante anything going on, you should step back and say, what am I doing? And make sure you're actually accomplishing what you set out to do if you're going to partake in that kind of thing. And I'm not encouraging anybody to do that.
I think that what should happen is if you find yourself in a situation where you are taking a vigilante action, you should disconnect from social media. You should go to your local community college, and you should see if they have an EMT course or a nursing assistant course. And you should take that course, get certified in that thing, and then go volunteer the time that you would be a vigilante at a local hospital, helping victims of other violence and other situations. That's what you should do with that energy. You should not think that you're a police officer, because clearly you are not if you identify as a predator hunter, because that's not even what the police do in the first place.
Right. And there's so much more there that comes into my mind about that kind of thing, because, you know, it's one thing to be interested in something and, you know, have a viewpoint on it, talk about the viewpoint, but it's a completely different thing to like actually being a complete hypocrite while you're being really loud and not realizing it. And I think that a lot of the people involved, for example, he makes a comment, Kyle Swanson, I believe, made the comment that like he doesn't understand why they've turned on him and they're charging him. Well, they're charging him because he violated the law with regard to it. The ends didn't justify the means in their perspective. And so to me, it just seems really weird. Like if you violated the law and you're so surprised that you're being charged, like why do you feel like you have the right to call this other person out for violating different laws, but nonetheless violating the law? And I just feel like if somebody got that through to him, he would probably actually be really, it would probably shock him that he was being so hypocritical, because I don't know that he would realize that.
This is a devastating situation that we found ourselves in with 6-year-old Samuel. And I hate to say this, but we've seen this before. We spoke with Teresa Balboa on camera on Monday while a search warrant was being executed at the apartment that she lives in. Now, days later, Houston police say she was found in a motel room more than 100 miles away with the body of that child, the body that is believed to be that child. We've just learned from Houston police that the district attorney's office has accepted a charge of tampering with a corpse against Balboa. Now, you'll remember, she is Samuel Olson's father's girlfriend. Houston police say Jasper police got an anonymous tip last night through Crime Stoppers about Samuel, which led them to that Best Western, which is where the body was found. Houston police would not give any information on the condition of the child that he was in when he was found in the motel room, how Teresa got to the hotel in Jasper, or why Jasper of all places. They are still waiting on the medical examiner's office, who will perform an autopsy and be able to tell how long the child has been dead and how he died.
She has been talking to investigators because, like I said, we had some inconsistent stories. So we have talked to her multiple times, and that's going to be ongoing. What led us to Jasper was the Crime Stoppers tip that came in, letting Jasper PD know that Ms. Balboa was there at that location in a motel.
Do we know how long Samuel may have been dead?
We do not know, and that'll be part of our extensive follow-up investigation.
still so many unanswered questions here on Samuel Olsen's death. We want to know why this happened. We asked Houston police what motive Balboa might have had for taking this child's body to Jasper. They said they didn't know. We asked why Balboa even had the child, and they said they didn't know that either. But what we do know is that Balboa was out on bond at the time that all of this was unfolding. She was released in the fall on a charge of assaulting a family member and impeding breath, and that was against Samuel's father, Dalton. Live outside of Houston Police, Micah Hatfield, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
Oh, this is just so troubling and so very sad.
Well, and as she says, it just keeps happening. We keep having these awful stories.
Oh, thank you, Micah. We appreciate that report. Now, continuing with this theme of talking about Samuel, we've learned a lot about Samuel over the past couple of days. ABC 13 digital producer Brittany Wilmore has much more on his earlier years. Brittany?
Good morning. Samuel's grandmother described him as someone who was sweet and kind, and he only just turned 6 years old over the weekend, so she was planning to have a birthday party for him. I want to go ahead and show you some video now of happier times, how we want to remember Samuel. He's there smiling, eating hot dogs, having a good time. His grandmother, Tanya Olsen, also told us about some of his favorite things. Toy Story characters that a lot of us grew up with, like Buzz Lightyear, Woody, even Forky. And then there's a video there where he's so animated. He even has an orange Triceratops toy on the table. Olsen says Samuel loved dinosaurs.
He is the sweetest, kindest, most loving child. He's so smart. He loves dinosaurs. He can tell you which ones are herbivores and carnivores, and he puts them in the hibiscus trees and lets them eat, and he loves Buzz Lightyear and Woody and Forky, and he's got a really funny personality, and he jokes about my name because I'm his egg. This is Sam. He just turned 6. We didn't even get to spend his birthday with him.
And Samuel's birthday was just on Saturday, so as you said, he just turned 6 years old. They were going to have a party for him, and even had worked in a backup plan to take him for pizza, something any child loves. So you can tell just how really distraught she is, how difficult this is. But we, of course, will continue to follow this and give you anything else that we learn about this little boy. Back to you guys.
So unexplainable. Just no reason whatsoever, no motive, and still, there would never be a motive.
Yeah, exactly.
For a young
Just
man
nothing
born
to
like that.
explain all of this, but you can hear so much pain in the grandmother's voice.
Oh, you
It's just-
certainly can.
Just terrible. Well, we now want to go to Jasper, Texas, and that's where ABC 13 reporter Charlie Etzedy is, outside that motel room where little Samuel's body was found. And Charlie, I know as you learn more information about what happened to this sweet little boy, the story just keeps getting more horrendous.
Oh my goodness, Melanie, the more details we learn, the more disturbing and disgusting, quite frankly, this case becomes. Now, right now at the Best Western Motel here in Jasper, things have remained pretty quiet this morning, but last night and overnight, it was just a big flurry of police activity out here, all focused on one of the rooms, number 106 over there. And as soon as the sun came up, more of the guests of this motel started to move around, and they say they saw all of that police activity and were shocked to learn what had happened here to a child.
Working overnight and into the early hours, investigators search for evidence. This Jasper Best Western becoming the scene of a horrific crime as shocked guests look on.
And it's just a sad situation, and I pray that their family.
HPD Chief Troy Finner confirming yesterday evening in a tweet that the body of a child believed to be 5-year-old Samuel Olsen was discovered in a room. In the days prior, a frantic search to find him after he was reported missing in a bizarre story shared by the girlfriend of Samuel's dad, Teresa Balboa. Here is what she told ABC 13 on Monday.
She just pointed and said, "That's my son." She took him, "Give me my son back." That was it. And the rest of the conversation was between me and the officer.
So the mother was with a police officer?
Yes. Or what I was under the impression was a police officer.
Several guests say they saw a heavy police presence at the motel yesterday afternoon.
I guess it was around 5:30 or 6 or so. I just happened to look outside the hotel window and I saw like 3 or 4 cop cars pull up. I noticed it was 8 or 9 police cars and said, well, this is not a good thing.
Some say they did not know about the search for Samuel until after they were told what happened. Mitchell says he had seen the boy's picture circulating on social media and says he never expected to witness police making an awful discovery just a few feet away from where he was staying.
They kept trying different room keys and they were knocking and trying to get the door open, and a couple of them had their guns out, and they finally opened the door, went in real quick, and they pulled a female out with brown hair.
The motel managers declined to speak on camera, and this guest overcome with emotion, thinking about the very young life that was taken.
Of course, I was talking to a man out here, and he said, I just said a prayer, and I said, well, I'm praying for the family as well. It's kind of sad.
You can just see the emotion on that man's face. He didn't even know this child, but obviously moved by it. And so what we've learned at this point is that Teresa Balboa is currently being held here in the Jasper County Jail. Right now, we are working to gather more details on when she will be going before a judge. We're live from Jasper. Charlie Edsity, ABC 13 Eyewitness News.
It is incredibly, incredibly sad. And I know you're following this story and you'll have a lot more for us later on. But as we learn more details, Charlie, just devastating.
It is so upsetting. Our hearts and condolences certainly to the family of the father.
Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LabrottieCreations.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at TeePublic, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join us on Patreon to fund future body exploration trips. But the best thing you can do for us is leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share us with your friends. And we'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
I'm holding out for a light, need to break up the dark. I'm waiting up for a sign, some neon in the rough, a savior in the twilight. Come get me from this endless midnight. Gets harder in the nighttime, unraveling from tainted paradise. It pulled me under, silver tongue telling me lies. Somebody's a lover, it was the thrill of my life. Feel playing high stakes, lay down your ace and your heart, leave it to fate. And that's just where it starts. My desperado, I'll be a whiskey baby, stone cold. Oh, Mother Mary, save me. It's a smoking gun, the sweetest, softest killer. It ain't for everyone. Honey, I love a thriller. I'm looking up to the stars to tell me what to do. God knows it's the ancient law that whispers it takes two. He's my scarlet letter, held forever my vendetta. Said he'll be mine forever, but only in the fairest weather. It pulled me under, caught me at just the right time. stronger. I started losing my mind, but if you asked me if I'd do it again, I'd tell you, baby, there's nothing worse or better than my desperado. I'll be a whiskey baby, stone cold lover. Oh, Mother Mary, save me. It's a smoking gun, the sweetest, softest killer. It ain't for everyone. Honey, love, a thriller. Oh, holy water, make me clean again. Open up my heart and release this man. It's got a hold on me. Only thing that makes me crazy. My enemy, my friend. Tell me you understand. There's nothing worse or better than love. My desperado, I'll be a whiskey baby, stone cold lover. Oh, Mother Mary, save me. It's a smoking gun, the sweetest, softest killer. It ain't for everyone. Honey, love, a thriller.